Although Star Wars Episode 1 Racer wasn't technically a new game released this year, it was a rather exciting return to a 1999 classic that is arguably one of the best games centered around the prequels. Even though I do have my fair share of critiques of this new 2020 update, which I did express in my review, there's still a lot of hidden details within the game that you might not have noticed while playing, or you might not know for those who don't intend on testing their skill when it comes to pod racing. Even though the biggest draws of this game are definitely the upgraded graphics and ability to play on more modern consoles, for the most part, the enhancement of graphics helps to spot several callbacks and similarities with this game and The Phantom Menace, including the addition of some planets that later found their way into other parts of Star Wars media, and even some making their way into official canon. Before we begin, these are just some things that I found interesting or unique about the game, and the list might change for others who have experienced the game for themselves. The following selections aren't listed in any particular order, but nonetheless, here's 10 things that I found interesting about Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Number 1 is that during my experience with this game, upgrades seem more important than the racers themselves. Completing all of the 25 circuits in this game, you unlock some cool characters and their pod racers along the way, but personally, I was able to play throughout the entire game just using Anakin without any problems. Most of the time, I was able to place first in each race throughout my playthrough, so I was able to gather enough Truggets to upgrade my racer, but if you're running short on in-game currency, there's plenty of racers that offer more favorable skills, such as high repair or boosting. Number 2 is one that some people may disagree with, but with the proper upgrades and knowledge of when to boost, interestingly enough, Sebulba isn't actually the fastest pod racer in the game. That spot actually goes to Ben Cordernos, and for those who haven't played the game, he's the only racer that doesn't compete in the Oovo IV Classic during the Phantom Menace due to technical difficulties thanks to Sebulba himself. Ben is the last character you acquire, cheat codes aside, and he can easily boost to over 1000 with the right upgrades, and for those who don't know, that's pretty damn fast in this game. Number 3 is one that you would probably expect, but every character that races in the Oovo IV Classic is present in this game. Of course, in order to play as every character, you have to first beat them in a circuit to unlock them, but there's a lot more this game has to offer that ties into the Phantom Menace than just the racer selection, which we'll talk about later on. Coming in on number 4 in this list is another one that you might also expect, but although there's 8 planets in this game, you only race on Tatooine for the first and last race, if we're excluding the Invitational Circuit, which takes place after the credits for the game. The first level is of course the Oovo IV Classic, but acts as more of a trial or tutorial and is one of the shortest maps. The final level, which unlocks Sebulba, is much closer to the actual course and length that we see in the film, not to mention that Sebulba is able to race alongside you for most of this circuit. Halfway through this list at number 5, and probably the most confusing to myself, is that even though there's 4 circuits in this game, the Amateur, Semi-Pro, Galactic, and finally Invitational Circuit, the credits roll after you begin the Oovo IV Classic at the end of the 3rd circuit. Afterwards, the Invitational only includes 4 races instead of 7, and at that point it somewhat feels out of place and like a quick addition to somewhat extend what some might consider to be a rather short game in general. Moving ahead, number 6 and 7 will both focus on locations that have found their way into another Star Wars game, which happens to be one of my favorites and also one that I played on this channel, and that is Bounty Hunter. Malastare is the only planet to be extensively featured outside this game besides Tatooine throughout the Star Wars franchise, and has made appearances in both the Clone Wars timeline and of course Bounty Hunter. Malastare is the homeworld to the Dug species, and pod racing was a huge sport on the planet. In Bounty Hunter, Jango Fett is sent to Malastare to find a Dug named Sebulba in order to gather more information about the Bando Gora and Death Stick Factory. Number 7 is focused on Oovo IV, and compared to Malastare, this planet hasn't been involved or utilized in the Star Wars universe. Oovo IV is a maximum security prison that orbits around the planet Oovo, and oddly enough, since Bounty Hunter was released, this moon has only been mentioned in numerous Star Wars books and media. Most interestingly though, this is actually the place where Jango acquires the infamous Slave One, which was the last remaining prototype of the Fire Spray class patrol ship. Sticking with the theme of locations for number 8, the remaining 5 planets that I've yet to discuss are only featured in Episode 1 Racer, which include Mon Gaza, a spice mining colony, Ando Prime, a snow-covered planet similar to Hoth, the aquatic planet Aquilaris, which of course has a fitting name, Barunda, which has elements from every other planet, making it the most interesting map based on layout, and finally Ord Arbana, which is a gas giant very similar to Bespin. Number 9, which probably happens to be the longest on this list, focuses on the ships and vehicles featured in this game, and of course, most of them were first seen in Episode 1. Based on order of appearance, we begin with the Consular class cruiser, or more commonly referred to as the Republic Cruiser, which of course was the vehicle Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were stowed upon in the opening of The Phantom Menace. The next vehicle appears a little later in the film, which happens to be the Gungan Bongo submarine. The third vehicle is more than likely featured in numerous Star Wars projects, but I specifically remember from Outland Station in Bounty Hunter, and it's a transport vehicle that Jango Fett must use to get from one building to another. Next up is the C-9979 landing craft that the droid army uses numerous times throughout Episode 1, and finally, the only vehicle that was also featured in the original trilogy happens to be the Sandcrawler. Now, there may have been more that I missed, but these are the main ones that I was able to spot while playing the game and reviewing gameplay footage. Number 10, and the one ending this list, happens to be some Episode 1 propaganda featuring Anakin and Sebulba on various maps. There's not a whole lot of imagery featured throughout each map of Episode 1 Racer, but there are definitely some cool visuals if you happen to catch them, which is actually rather hard if you don't intend on crashing your racer. In addition to these posters or propaganda, another small but cool detail is actually towards the final few races, where there's several patches of the map that correspond to the design on Anakin's racer, which matches some of the walls surrounding the track. Even though this list features only 10 interesting things about Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, there's no doubt that there's still areas and locations of the game that I missed and should be explored further. If there's anything that you were able to catch or notice that I didn't feature on this list, please drop those down below in the comments. If you happen to like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel for regular Star Wars gaming videos, and I hope everyone continues to stay safe. Thanks for watching everyone, and hopefully I'll see you on the next video.